Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about democracy, Western democracy, I guess. Where to from here? Where's it going? Will it even survive? Will it exist? Will it take a very different form in the future and the near future at that? Will it be got rid of altogether? Will we have a Marxist utopian paradise? So where is not simply democracy, although there's that at the centre of this issue, but what form of government will we have in the near future? Now, what's brought this on for me, at least, or not that it's ever far from my mind, was the way that the globalist stooge puppet Rishi Sunak has just been installed as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. No election, no vote of the membership, not even a vote of the parliamentary party. Nobody fucking voted for him. So there's a Prime Minister. I mean, you've got to appreciate the delicious ironies, and there are many of them in this. So the guy has been installed as Prime Minister who nobody voted for. Now, there's raucous rejoicing on the Indian subcontinent because Rishi Sunak is of Indian genetic heritage. Now, there's one thing the Indians are big on is genetic heritage. Even if you're 5, 6, 7 generations born outside of India, if you've got the Indian genetic heritage, and they're very, very focused on not only the Hindu religion, but maintaining genetic purity. And people who don't have genetic purity, Indian genetic purity, just aren't real people. So, and they view anyone who's again been born 5, 6, 7 generations outside of India as still being Indian. So the Indian nationalist media is going berserk over this. Hey, they colonised us. Now we're in charge of them. Now we tell them what to do. Damn fucking white devil, fucking fascist Nazis. Yeah, the colonialists, suck on that, motherfuckers. And they're going up. And then the Indians are superior to everybody. We're going to be in charge of everything. We're in charge of every country and every business because we're the fucking leaders of the world. You look at this, and it wasn't for the fact that someone of Indian heritage had just been installed as Prime Minister of Britain without a vote, then you could write them off as being hysterical lunatics. But given that, maybe it's true. Maybe the Indians will be running the world real soon. They're certainly salivating over the prospect. So there you go. And again, people of Indian heritage. Now, if they were born in India and educated in India and all that sort of stuff, that's one thing. But when you haven't, your family don't come from India, or you've been born outside of India for multiple generations, then I don't know why the Indians still claim someone like that as one of their own. Any white person is born outside of the white countries for 1 or 2 generations, as in say someone emigrates from say Britain to the United States as an example. And if they arrive in the United States young enough, then they're Americans anyway in their view. And if they're born there, there's nothing British about them. They're Americans, and that's it. So same would be here for Australia or New Zealand or Canada or something like that. But anyway, so democracy, where's it going now? Democracy, and by democracy, I don't mean the tyranny of the majority, and I'll come back to that in a minute, but democracy being the right of the citizens to vote for the people who govern them, to select their representatives, to vote for them into a parliament, or whether it be regional or federal, it doesn't matter, and then to decide how long that government should stay in office. And that's what I mean by democracy. So I'm using it generically. I don't want somebody to come and go, yeah, America's really a republic. So now, when any sort of group, or whether it be Plato in ancient Athens, or the folks who wrote the United States Constitution, the Jeffersons and the Madisons and so on, those people all had the how do we make the government work? The British democracy developed sort of gradually and organically. It wasn't just suddenly thrust on the people, or just suddenly appeared. It it was something that grew organically, originally from a very tight ruling class. And then, of course, there's the franchise extended. But really, the franchise in any meaningful way didn't start to increase in England or Britain until the 1830s, and the 1832 Reform Bill being not simply an increase in the amount of people voting, because there's still quite a small, there's only like 600,000 people voting back then, from quite a small population, by the way, but then the organically it increased as the economy changed, as the participants in parliaments changed, and so on. So there's a very organic growth of wider democratic representation, the pool of people who voted and their class, their level of wealth between 1830 and say the late 1880s, in that area there. So in that 50 years, which by the way was at the peak time of the Industrial Revolution and the effects that had on Britain and its social structure and its population centres and so on. So there's the British experience with democracy grew quite organically, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But if you look at the entire sort of time of say any type of democratic representation, you could go from really the sort of parliaments that were around in the early 1600s, small though they may be in terms of representation and voting, pushed aside during the Cromwell era, brought back again during the time of Charles II, and really developing from there. So it has a rich, long history, not simply of democratic participation, but the way laws are passed, the separation of powers, the way the democracy involved in terms of the independence of courts of law, the reliance on evidence rather than ideology, that had been very much part of the more ecclesiastical type ways of administering jurisprudence, canon law and so on. So there are a lot of developments there. Now, a lot of those developments were captured by the American founding fathers when they put the Constitution together. The president was the king, but had to be elected and could be removed from office. And so there's a lot of similarities there, is modelled quite closely. They looked at what they thought was the failings of the British system, and it had them, and tried to make something that was better than that. Well, I think they did a pretty decent job of it, actually. They're all British. Most of them were British in every sense, perceived themselves really as British, and thought, well, we can improve on that model that we already think is the basis for democracy in this country. They had a wider franchise and that sort of, but still it was adult males and the propertied class primarily had the right to vote. And same in Britain, they people over a certain income or who owned a certain amount of property, they really were the voters. Even in 1832, there was, I think, 650,000 people who had the right to vote, but the population was less than 10 million, I think, at the time. So if you look at the adult males of the population who would have been over the age of, off the top of my head, I think it was 23 was the vote then. Over the age of 23, people dying, of course, much younger in those days, but the population of adult males was maybe 2 million, say, who fit into that category. So 600,000 of those were voting. So it's still quite a decent franchise. So anyway, but increasing there as the population went on. A lot of the increase in the amount of voters in Britain, United Kingdom, came about from, well, increases of population, but the amount of people that were being pushed into the middle class because of the Industrial Revolution and the wealth that generated for Britain and its citizens. But even in the 1880s, there was, I think, just shy of 5 million voters, somewhere around there in Britain. So at its height, before universal franchise came in, and or universal male franchise, and then subsequently universal franchise, including women, you had around 50% of the male, give or take, 50, they're about 50% of the male population were voting, and say 10% of the female population. And then in, I think it was 1922, universal male voting, and then and this was brought about by the war, the mass mobilisation of the First World War. And then I think it was in 1928, off the top of my head, that women were given the vote. There's a big song and dance about how progressive New Zealand was, because they gave the vote to women in, I think it was 1895, or maybe in 1893. And this is heralded as some great progressive initiative. That's absolute, utter, total bullshit. If they only had men voting, then the Maoris would have come close to outnumbering the white voters. And so in order to give the whites a majority of the vote, they gave women the vote to make sure of it. But that was only done for that. It wasn't done for any progressive values or anything of that sort. It was simply a way of increasing the number of white voters. But democracy today, or even the Republican version of it, proportional representation, as say happens in the United States Senate and that sort of thing, it's getting in the way. The globalists realised if they wanted to put the globalist project onto the Western world, which is where the advanced democracies were and where the wealth was, if they wanted to put the globalist project in place and impose it, the people wouldn't go along with it. If they put the globalist, anywhere you would put the globalist project up for a vote by the people, it would get absolutely crushed at the polls. Wouldn't even come close. Now, the globalists knew that, so they had to undermine democracy. Democracy, again, I'm referring to generically here, to the right of the people to select their candidates, A, select their government, B, and then to decide how long that government should stay in office through the ballot box and via regular elections and that sort of thing. So the globalists realised that they had to take over the body's politic. They had to take over all the major parties. They had to infiltrate those parties with their own candidates, or with tame candidates, or with zombie candidates. It really doesn't matter. And they had to control the party machinery and the parliamentary party, using the party executive, if you like, as the portal to get into the elected representatives. And then of course they had to control the media and the public service. In fact, any voice that is expressed in public, any opinion shaping voice anywhere, the globalists took control. Give them credit. Gee, they did a good job of it. They achieved in little more than a generation. They went from having hardly any control to having near total control. So democracy has no place, and the globalists can't function, and they need to function with absolute confidence. They need to be able to control not just tomorrow and next week, but next year, next decade. They need to have that level of control if they're going to implement their project. And so there's a risk. There's always a risk while democracy exists that a candidate is going to get up that will say, well, I'm going to tell those globalists to fuck off, and that person will get votes. They'll be voted in, no question. There's not even a debate about it. They will get voted in, and they'll cause the globalists all sorts of trouble. Now, the globalists won't roll over and just take it. They'll rig elections. They'll have an entire media campaign of that Billy Bob's a rapist, pedophile, Nazi, fascist. They'll come at him with everything, including the kitchen sink. So there's always that. But the globalists really don't want democracy at all. They have to make sure it is totally neutralised, and the installation of the effortless installation of Rishi Sunak into as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom illustrates just how much clout the globalists have. I mean, fuck. Now, not only that, but there was an election in a very major, very advanced Western economy for the chief executive before that, a couple of years before that. And one of the most unimpressive candidates in history that didn't bother doing any campaigning ended up getting not only the highest votes in history, but 12 million votes more. 12 million votes more than the previous record holder. Yeah, everyone believes that. But it illustrates the power of the globalists. I mean, they can do whatever the fuck they want, but there's always a chance while democracy remains, while the people have a choice through the ballot box, the chance always remains, minimal though it may be, that someone's going to get up who opposes the globalist project, or someone who's they think's on board suddenly becomes popular. Boris Johnson could have done it in the UK. He had a massive majority. He had public support, just left, right, and centre. He could have told the globe. That was the one short window. Boris could have told the globalists to fuck off. No, I'm the Prime Minister. I fucking run this country for the people that voted for me. But of course, he was a globalist flunk. He went down like a sack of shit. But again, that's a demonstration of globalist power. So where's democracy going? The globalists are really in the ascendant now. Whether they're sort of on the verge of losing their grip, we can talk about that. But they're clearly at this very minute they're in the ascendant. If you can decide if you can just install a president or a prime minister in an advanced Western economy that theoretically has a functioning democracy, then you can do pretty much whatever the fuck you want. So democracy has no place for them. It either must be got rid of completely or utterly neutralized. For example, the Green New Deal. No one's going to vote for that. I mean, their energy bills are 2, 3, 4, 5 times what they once were. No one's going to vote for that, and no one believes this, other than college kids and school kids. No one believes the world's going to end in the next 5 minutes or something. What a load of crap! And they're just imposing this on us without any vote. No one's asked me to vote for whether or not I want the Green New Deal. Whether or not I'm prepared to pay the price for the Green New Deal, these sorts of things. So really, democracy has got to go as far as the globe is concerned. Either got rid of it entirely or neutralised. But look, when we look around, who else is in support of democracy? I believe I would have thought it would have been impossible to infiltrate a democracy to the extent that all across the Western world they have been. I thought the politicians wouldn't allow it. The judges wouldn't allow it, the Supreme Courts wouldn't allow it, the nationalistic sense, of a politician. I represent, the voters of this country. I represent this country's. I would have thought it would have been impossible to break that down into where it is today. And so that was really the primary protection ultimately, that the politicians say, no, I represent the voters. I don't represent your international bullshit interests. But that hasn't come to pass. And when you look at how nationalist the politicians were over the years, prior to really I suppose the early 1990s, before that, the most politicians, even if they did believe in a more globalized world, they still were very nationalist and nationalists believed they represented their country and their people and their voters and so on, and believed they were, Americans, for example, and that, British or whatever, and had a rich history that they revered. But that's all gone. The entire political class sold out their fellow citizens. So the political class doesn't think democracy is worth a pinch of shit anymore, or the elite class. That's gone. And there may be some outliers, but generally that's completely gone. Now let's go to the college kids, for example. They've been trained to believe that the democracy is tantamount to a fascist Nazi, a state of oppression against transgender bathrooms or black lesbians or something. They've been trained to believe that it's an oppressive regime which is evil and bad, slavery and Hitler and they've been so they believe democracy is don't you know that climate change, the world's going to end tomorrow, and these evil straight white male democratically elected politicians, they're evil. They're just letting the world die. I mean, the world's going to die in 5 minutes. They're all Hitler. They're Nazis. So they don't think democracy is the way to go, and similarly believe that you have to shut down any view or any voice that disagrees. And so democracy hardly fits into that paradigm. So they're gone. Now, if you look at people like me, I believe democracy has been undermined by, and I'm sure there's plenty like me, who believe democracy has been undermined to the point of outright dysfunction. It no longer represents the people. It's no longer concerned about the people. It views the people as their masters, their bosses, their controllers, they're globalists, and the people are just not even the shit on their shoes now. So I don't know how we can rejig, the body politic, the democratic body politic, how it can be reformed and made relevant again, as in the politicians report to the people. I suppose the party machine has to be broken down. We have to elect. We have to make sure that we decide who stands for election, and then have a vote, and then anybody with globalist interest has to declare them. But again, it requires just good and true people to be overseeing that. Those people were absent when the globalists took over. I thought those people were in abundance. Whether they were the judges or the politicians or the elite members of our society, I thought those people that would protect us from things like the globalist takeover. I thought they were in abundance and they would never allow this sort of thing to happen. But we need to redefine what's just, good and true, and the loyalty to the country and these sorts of things. And none of that's going to stop globalization. Anyone can sell their goods and services anywhere in the world. There's nothing to stop them doing that. So this idea that we've either got to have 100% globalization or there's zero trade anywhere is utter nonsense, utter bullshit. So how do we view democracy? I think democracy's probably in its dying days. I think the idea of unelected bodies like the European Union or the United Nations, corrupt, useless, moronic technocrats. I think that's the most likely future at the moment, given the current trajectory. Now things could change. The dream team of Trump and DeSantis could get up in 2024, and provided they go at it with vigor, and not the slow walk stuff of Trump's first presidency, then they really could make a difference. And maybe there'll be a mass defection of politicians from the Conservative Party, because they're going to lose. Next election, they're going to get torn to pieces. Then maybe those mass defections to the Reform Party could change the balance of power in Britain and usher in a party that will repudiate the globalist takeover. I personally doubt it. I hope it does happen. But that's where democracy is. I don't think democracy has any defenders currently, other than folks like me online. I don't think democracy has any defenders, and I don't think that democracy has long to go in whatever iteration. And I think that's probably one of the greatest tragedies of modern history, and it's befallen one of the most richest, successful civilizations ever in history. Figure that if you can. You've been attached to us today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.